The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store in San Pedro, Texas, and Penelope Turner descended with trembling hands and a face she desperately tried to hide beneath the brim of her worn bonnet. The October sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty street, and she could feel the curious stares of townsfolk burning into her back as she collected her single battered trunk from the driver. She kept her head down, praying no one would notice the purple bruise that swelled around her left eye, a parting gift from the man she had fled 3 days ago in St. Louis. Owen Lancaster stood outside the feed store, having just loaded supplies onto his wagon, when he noticed the woman stepping down from the coach. He had forgotten all about the mail-order bride arriving today, the one his ranch foreman had arranged for his younger brother Matthew before Matthew had gotten himself killed in a stampede 2 months back. The advertisement had already been placed, the arrangements made, and when the woman had written back accepting, Owen had been too consumed with grief and the burden of running the ranch alone to send word that the groom was no longer among the living. He wiped his dusty hands on his worn denim trousers and approached slowly, his boots thudding against the wooden planks of the boardwalk. As he drew closer, the woman looked up briefly, and that was when he saw it, the unmistakable mark of violence across her delicate features. His jaw tightened, old memories flooding back of his own mother's bruised face before his father had finally drunk himself to death. "Miss Turner?" he asked quietly, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. Penelope's green eyes widened slightly and she instinctively touched her bonnet, pulling it lower. "Yes, you must be Matthew Lancaster." Owen's throat constricted. "No, madam, I am Owen Lancaster. Matthew was my brother." He paused, searching for the right words. "There was an accident on the ranch. He did not survive. I should have written to you, but things have been difficult, and I apologize for not informing you sooner." The color drained from Penelope's face, and for a moment Owen thought she might collapse right there in the street. He reached out instinctively to steady her, his calloused hand gentle on her elbow. She flinched at the touch, and he immediately withdrew, holding his hands up in a peaceful gesture. "I understand this is terrible news," he said softly. "But you have traveled so far, and I would not feel right sending you back without offering you a place to rest and recover from your journey. My ranch has a guest room. You are welcome to stay as long as you need while you figure out what you would like to do next." Penelope looked at him then, really looked at him. He was tall, perhaps in his late 20s, with kind brown eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a weathered face that spoke of long hours in the sun. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and there was something gentle in his demeanor that made her want to weep with relief. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered, the admission costing her pride dearly. "I used everything I had for the journey here." "Then it is settled," Owen said firmly. "You will stay at the ranch. I promise you will be safe there." The word safe hung in the air between them, and Penelope knew he had seen the bruise, knew he understood more than she had spoken aloud. She nodded slowly, not trusting her voice. Owen collected her trunk as though it weighed nothing and carried it to his wagon. He helped her up onto the seat with the same careful gentleness, never gripping too hard, never moving too fast. As they drove out of San Pedro toward his ranch, Penelope watched the landscape change from dusty streets to rolling prairie dotted with mesquite trees. "How long is the journey?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. "About 40 minutes, Owen replied, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. "The ranch is called the Double L. My father started it 20 years ago, though he was not much of a rancher. I have been running it properly for the past 5 years since he passed." "I am sorry for your loss," Penelope said automatically. "Do not be." Owen's voice was flat. He was not a good man. The honesty in his statement surprised her, and she glanced at him from beneath her bonnet. Most people dressed up the truth about their departed loved ones, painted pretty pictures over ugly realities. But Owen Lancaster seemed to have no patience for such pretense. "My condolences about your brother, then," she amended. "That loss must be fresh and painful." Owen's hands tightened on the reins. Matthew was young and reckless, but he had a good heart. He should have had many more years ahead of him. He paused, then added quietly, "He would have been happy to meet you. He was excited about starting a family." Penelope felt tears prick at her eyes. She had not known Matthew Lancaster, but she mourned for the future they might have had together, a future that surely would have been better than the past she had escaped. Charles Pemberton, the man who had given her the black eye, had been her employer and then her tormentor. When he had proposed marriage, she had been foolish enough to believe his pretty words about love and security. The first time he struck her was 2 weeks after she accepted. The last time was the night before she boarded the stagecoach west. The ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was more substantial than Penelope had expected, with a sturdy main house, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals where horses moved lazily in the afternoon heat. Everything looked well maintained, speaking to Owen's dedication to the property. "It is beautiful," Penelope said honestly. "It is home," Owen replied simply. "I have 3 ranch hands who help with the cattle and horses. They live in the bunkhouse over there. They are good men, but if any of them bother you, you tell me immediately." "I will," Penelope promised, though she had little faith that any man would truly protect her if push came to shove. Men protected their own interests, she had learned. Everything else was secondary. Owen pulled the wagon up to the main house and jumped down, coming around to help Penelope descend. This time she did not flinch when he offered his hand, though her muscles remained tense, ready to flee if necessary. He noticed, she could tell, but he said nothing, only guided her up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was surprisingly clean for a bachelor's home. The front room had comfortable furniture, a stone fireplace and windows that let in plenty of light. Everything was simple but well crafted, functional rather than decorative. "The guest room is upstairs," Owen said, carrying her trunk toward the staircase. "There is a washroom at the end of the hall. I will heat some water for you if you would like to wash up after your journey." "That would be very kind," Penelope said, following him up the wooden stairs. He showed her to a small but pleasant room with a bed covered in a faded quilt, a dresser, and a window overlooking the back pastures. Owen set her trunk down carefully and turned to face her. "I know this is not what you expected when you came west," he said. "But I want you to know that you are welcome here for as long as you need. There is no pressure, no obligation. You have had a long journey, and from the looks of it, you left behind some trouble. Whatever that trouble was, it will not find you here." Penelope's composure finally cracked, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. She quickly brushed it away, embarrassed by the display of emotion. "Thank you," she managed. "You do not know how much that means." Owen nodded once, then left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. Penelope sat down on the bed and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of everything that had happened. She had escaped Charles, but she had lost her chance at the marriage she had hoped would provide security. She was alone in a strange place, dependent on the charity of a man she did not know. Yet somehow, despite everything, she felt safer than she had in months. That evening, Owen prepared a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread. Penelope came downstairs freshly washed, wearing a clean dress of deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. The bruise was still visible, but she no longer tried to hide it. She had noticed that Owen never stared at it, never asked uncomfortable questions, and his tactful silence made it easier to bear. They ate at the kitchen table, the sounds of their spoons against bowls filling the comfortable quiet. Finally, Penelope worked up the courage to ask the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What will happen now? I mean, with me being here." Owen set down his spoon and looked at her directly. "That depends on what you want to happen. If you want to return east, I will give you money for passage and something extra to help you get settled. If you want to stay in San Pedro and look for work, I can speak to people in town, help you find a position, or you can stay here at the ranch. Lord knows I could use help with the house and the bookkeeping. Matthew used to help me with the accounts, and I have been struggling to keep them straight on my own." "You would hire me?" Penelope asked, surprised. "I would pay you a fair wage and provide room and board," Owen confirmed. "You would have your own space, your own money, no strings attached. If you decide to leave later, that is your choice." It was more than Penelope could have hoped for. "I accept," she said quickly. "I am good with numbers and I can cook and clean. I will earn my keep, I promise you that." "I do not doubt it," Owen said with a slight smile. "We can work out the details tomorrow. For tonight, just rest. You have been through enough." Over the following days, Penelope settled into life at the Double L Ranch. She took over the household tasks with quiet efficiency, preparing meals, cleaning, and mending clothes. Owen showed her the ranch's ledgers, and she spent her afternoons working through the accounts, her neat handwriting filling the pages as she brought order to the financial chaos Matthew's death had left behind. The three ranch hands, Diego, Samuel, and Tommy, were initially curious about the new woman at the ranch, but Owen's protective presence and Penelope's reserved demeanor kept them respectful. Diego, the oldest at 40, was a skilled horseman who had worked for Owen's father. Samuel was a quiet man in his 30s who rarely spoke but worked harder than anyone. Tommy was barely 20, enthusiastic and friendly, treating Penelope with the awkward courtesy of someone who had been raised to respect women, but did not quite know how to talk to them. As October turned to November, Penelope found herself healing in ways she had not expected. The bruise faded from purple to yellow to nothing, and with it, some of the fear that had lived in her chest began to ease. Owen was true to his word in every way. He never pressured her, never made inappropriate advances, never even raised his voice in her presence. He was patient and kind, treating her like a person of value rather than property or an inconvenience. But Penelope also noticed other things about Owen Lancaster. She noticed how he woke before dawn every day to check on the animals, how he worked until his hands were raw, and his shirt was soaked with sweat. She noticed the way he spoke gently to the horses, the way he helped Tommy when the young man struggled with a task, the way he set aside portions of their meals for Diego's elderly mother in town. Owen was a good man in a way that had nothing to do with grand gestures, and everything to do with consistent, quiet decency. And she noticed the way her heart had started to beat faster when he came in for supper each evening, the way her eyes sought him out across the room, the way his rare smiles made warmth spread through her chest. One afternoon in mid-November, Penelope was in the kitchen making bread when she heard a commotion outside. She looked through the window to see Owen in the corral with a large bay horse that was clearly agitated, bucking and kicking at the fence. Owen was trying to calm the animal, speaking in low tones, but the horse was having none of it. Without thinking, Penelope ran outside. "What is wrong?" "Barbed wire caught his leg," Owen called back, never taking his eyes off the horse. "I need to check the wound, but he is too panicked to let me near him." "Let me try," Penelope said, climbing up on the fence. Owen looked at her sharply. "It is not safe." I grew up around horses, Penelope said. My father was a farrier before he died. I know how to handle them. Owen hesitated, then nodded. Be careful. Penelope entered the corral slowly, keeping her movements smooth and predictable. She began humming a low tune, something her father had taught her years ago. The horse's ears flicked toward her and she kept humming until she was close enough to extend her hand. The horse snorted and backed away, but she followed patiently, never rushing, never forcing. After what felt like an eternity, the horse allowed her to touch his neck. She stroked him gently, continuing to hum, and gradually the animal's panic subsided. Owen approached carefully with the medical supplies, and together they examined the wound. It was nasty but not deep, and Owen cleaned and bandaged it while Penelope kept the horse calm. When it was done, they stepped out of the corral, and Owen looked at her with something like admiration in his eyes. Where did you learn to do that, my father? Penelope said, suddenly feeling shy under his gaze. He said horses respond to confidence and calm. If you are afraid, they know it. But if you approach them with steady certainty, they will trust you. Wise man, Owen said quietly. Thank you. That could have gone much worse. You are welcome. They stood there for a moment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard, and something shifted between them. Penelope felt it like a physical thing, a recognition that what existed between them was more than employer and employee, more than host and guest. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Owen finally asked the question Penelope had been waiting for. What happened to you? Before you came here, Penelope's hand stilled on the mending in her lap. She had known this conversation would come eventually, but that did not make it easier. I was employed as a governess in St. Louis, she said slowly. The family was wealthy, respectable. When the children grew old enough not to need a governess anymore, the husband offered me a position as his wife's companion. His wife was sickly, needed someone to read to her, help her with correspondence. She paused, gathering her courage. After his wife died, he began courting me. I was 23, alone in the world, and he promised security. I accepted his proposal. Owen said nothing, just watched her with those steady brown eyes. He changed after I agreed to marry him, Penelope continued. Became possessive, controlling, then angry. The first time he struck me, he apologized profusely, said it would never happen again. But it did happen again, and again. Her voice hardened. The night before I left, he beat me badly enough that I knew the next time might kill me. So I took what money I had saved, left everything else behind, and answered the advertisement for a mail-order bride. It seemed like the only escape available to me. What was his name? Owen asked quietly. Why? Because if he comes looking for you, I want to know who to watch for. Penelope met his gaze. Charles Pemberton. But he will not come looking for me. I was a governess, a servant. His pride would never allow him to chase after someone he considers beneath him. Good, Owen said, because if he did come here, he would regret it. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Penelope's breath catch. You do not owe me that kind of loyalty. Maybe not, Owen agreed, but that does not change how I feel. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Penelope looked down at her mending, her fingers trembling slightly. How do you feel, Owen? He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then he said, From the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. At first I told myself it was just concern, that I felt responsible for you being here. But it is more than that. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. You are smart and capable and brave. You have been through hell, but you did not let it break you. You got up every day and kept going. That takes a strength most people do not have. Penelope felt tears prick at her eyes again, but this time they were not tears of pain. I care for you too, she whispered. I did not think I could feel this way again. After Charles, I thought I would never trust another man, but you are different. You are kind and patient and good. Being near you makes me feel safe in a way I have not felt since my parents were alive. Owen stood and crossed to where she sat, then knelt beside her chair. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he gently cupped her face in his work-roughened hand. I would never hurt you, he said fiercely. Not ever. You need to know that. I do know that, Penelope said, leaning into his touch. I trust you, Owen Lancaster. He leaned forward and kissed her then, gentle and careful, his lips warm against hers. It was nothing like the demanding, bruising kisses Charles had forced on her. This was tender, questioning, giving her every opportunity to refuse. Instead, Penelope kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her fingers. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Owen rested his forehead against hers. I know this is fast, he said. I know you probably need time. I have had time, Penelope interrupted. I have had weeks here with you, watching you, learning who you are. I know you, Owen, and I know what I feel. What do you feel? He asked. Like I am home, she said simply. Like I finally found where I belong. Owen pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Penelope melted into the embrace. For the first time since her parents died, she felt truly safe, truly cherished. The future stretched out before her, no longer frightening but full of possibility. Over the next weeks, their relationship deepened. Owen courted Penelope properly, despite the fact that they lived under the same roof. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, taught her to ride the gentler horses, and sat with her in the evenings reading aloud from books they both enjoyed. Penelope found herself laughing more, the tight knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest for so long gradually unwinding. December arrived with a cold snap that brought frost to the morning grass. Penelope was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Owen came in from the barn, stamping his feet to warm them. The cattle are going to need extra feed today, he said, pouring himself coffee. Diego and I will need to ride out to the north pasture. Will you be back for lunch? Penelope asked. Should be. Owen came up behind her and slipped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you making? Pancakes and bacon, Penelope said, leaning back against him. Your favorite. You spoil me, Owen murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. Someone should, Penelope replied, turning in his arms to face him. You work too hard. Ranching is hard work, Owen said with a shrug, but it is good work, honest work. Penelope reached up and traced the line of his jaw with her fingers. I love you, she said, the words coming easily now. She had told him before, but each time still felt important, still felt like a gift she was giving him. Owen's eyes softened. I love you too, more than I thought I could love anyone. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Owen frowned, glancing at the clock. It was barely past dawn, too early for casual visitors. He gave Penelope's waist a quick squeeze and went to answer it. Standing on the porch was a man Penelope had never seen before, well dressed in city clothes that looked out of place in the ranch setting. He was probably in his 40s, with graying temples and cold blue eyes. Can I help you? Owen asked, his voice carefully neutral. I am looking for a woman named Penelope Turner, the man said. I was told she might be staying at this ranch. Penelope's blood turned to ice. She recognized that voice. Charles Pemberton had come after all. Owen's posture changed subtly, his body blocking the doorway more completely. What business do you have with Miss Turner? She is my fiancée, Charles said smoothly. She left St. Louis quite suddenly, and I have been terribly worried about her. I have come to bring her home. I am not your fiancé, Penelope said, stepping forward despite her fear. I never was. I broke off our engagement before I left. Charles's eyes found her, and his pleasant expression hardened. Penelope, darling, you were not thinking clearly. You were upset. But I have forgiven you for running away, and now it is time to come home and set a proper wedding date. No, Penelope said firmly. I am not going anywhere with you. You do not have a choice, Charles said, his voice taking on an edge. We have an agreement. An agreement is null and void when one party uses violence, Owen said coldly. And I think we both know you used plenty of that. Charles's eyes narrowed. This is none of your concern, Cowboy. Penelope and I are engaged, which means she is my responsibility. She ended that engagement, Owen said, which means your only responsibility is to leave this property immediately, not without Penelope. Charles took a step forward, and Owen moved to block him completely. You are not taking her anywhere, Owen said, his voice dangerous now. She does not want to go with you, and I will not allow you to force her. Charles laughed, but there was no humor in it. Allow me. You are a nobody, a dusty rancher in the middle of nowhere. I am a wealthy businessman with connections. If I say Penelope belongs to me, then she belongs to me. That is where you are wrong, Owen said. Penelope does not belong to anyone. She is a free woman who can make her own choices, and she has chosen to stay here. We will see what the law has to say about that, Charles threatened. The law will say that you have no claim on her, Owen replied. No marriage, no legal contract. You are a jilted suitor, nothing more. And if you try to take her against her will, you will find yourself facing kidnapping charges. Charles's face flushed red with anger. You think you can threaten me? I am not threatening you, Owen said calmly. I am explaining the situation. Penelope is staying here. You are leaving. Those are the facts. For a moment, Penelope thought Charles might try to force his way inside. His hands clenched into fists, and she saw the rage building in his eyes, the same rage that had preceded every beating. She took an involuntary step backward. But then Diego appeared from the direction of the barn, followed by Samuel and Tommy. All three men were carrying rifles, not pointing them at anyone but making their presence very clear. Diego stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Everything all right, boss? He asked, his eyes on Charles. This gentleman was just leaving, Owen said. Charles looked at the assembled men, clearly calculating his odds. Finally, he turned his cold gaze back to Penelope. This is not over, he said. You will regret this choice. The only thing I regret is ever accepting your proposal, Penelope said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Leave now, and do not come back. Charles glared at her for another long moment, then turned on his heel and stalked back to his horse. He mounted and rode off without another word, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Owen waited until Charles was out of sight before turning to Penelope. Are you all right? Penelope nodded, but her hands were shaking. Yes, no, I do not know. I did not think he would actually come after me. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. He cannot hurt you anymore, I promise you that. What if he comes back? Penelope asked, her voice muffled against Owen's chest. Then we will deal with it, Owen said firmly. But I do not think he will. Men like him are cowards. They only feel powerful when they are hurting someone weaker. Faced with real opposition, they back down. Diego cleared his throat. We will keep watch, Miss Penelope. If that man comes back around here, we will know about it. Thank you, Penelope said, looking at the three ranch hands with gratitude. All of you. You are part of this ranch now, Samuel said gruffly. We look after our own. After the men returned to their work, Owen guided Penelope back inside. She was still trembling, adrenaline making her lightheaded. Owen sat her down at the kitchen table and pressed a cup of hot coffee into her hands. Drink, he instructed gently. You are in shock. Penelope obeyed, the warmth of the coffee helping to steady her. I am sorry, she said. I brought trouble to your door. No, Owen said firmly, crouching in front of her so they were eye to eye. That man brought trouble to my door, not you. You did nothing wrong. You left a dangerous situation, and that took courage. What happened today is not your fault. But what if he makes trouble for you? He said he has connections. Let him try, Owen said. I have lived in San Pedro my whole life. I have friends here too, people who know my character. Some fancy businessman from St. Louis does not scare me. Penelope set down her coffee and took Owen's face in her hands. How did I get so lucky? She asked. To find you. I think I am the lucky one, Owen replied, covering her hands with his own. You walked into my life and changed everything. Made me remember what it is to care about someone, to want to build a future with another person. I want that too, Penelope said. A future with you. Owen smiled, that slow, rare smile that made her heart skip. Then marry me, he said. Not because you need protection or security, though I will provide both. Marry me because you love me and because I love you. Marry me because when I think about the rest of my life, I cannot imagine it without you. Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks, but this time they were tears of joy. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you, Owen Lancaster. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, a kiss full of promise and hope. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. I should warn you, Owen said. I am not the marrying type according to most folks in town. I am too serious, too focused on the ranch. They had given up on me ever settling down. Good, Penelope said with a laugh. Then they will be very surprised. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in San Pedro. The entire town turned out, curious about the mail-order bride who had been meant for Owen's brother but had won Owen's heart instead. Penelope wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Owen had insisted on buying for her, and she carried a bouquet of winter wildflowers that Diego's mother had arranged. As she walked down the aisle toward Owen, seeing the love and devotion in his eyes, Penelope felt like she was stepping into a new life entirely. The fear and pain of her past fell away, replaced by a future full of possibility. The preacher, an elderly man named Reverend Thomas, smiled benevolently at them both. Dearly beloved, he began, and Penelope's heart swelled with happiness. When Owen slipped the simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of their days, she believed him with every fiber of her being. And when she made the same promises in return, she meant them with all her heart. You may kiss your bride, Reverend Thomas announced, and Owen did not need to be told twice. He cupped Penelope's face gently, always gently, and kissed her as the congregation applauded. The reception was held at the town hall, and the citizens of San Pedro proved to be generous and welcoming. They brought food and gifts, and more than one person told Penelope how lucky she was to have caught Owen Lancaster's attention. But when she looked at her new husband, laughing with Tommy about something while balancing a plate of food, she knew that luck had very little to do with it. What they had found together was built on respect and trust and genuine affection, things that could not be attributed to chance alone. As the evening drew to a close, Owen and Penelope rode back to the Double L Ranch in the wagon, bundled against the December cold. Owen had one arm around his wife, keeping her close, and Penelope rested her head on his shoulder. Happy? Owen asked softly. Happier than I have ever been, Penelope replied honestly. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for staying, Owen said. For not running when things got complicated. Where would I run to? Penelope asked with a smile. You are my home now. When they reached the ranch, Owen insisted on carrying Penelope over the threshold, even though she laughingly protested that it was unnecessary. He set her down gently in the front room, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the weight of the commitment they had made settling over them. "I have never done this before," Owen admitted quietly. "Been married, I mean. I want to do right by you, but I am bound to make mistakes." "We will figure it out together," Penelope assured him. "That is what marriage is, I think, learning each other, growing together." Owen pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Mrs. Lancaster." "I love you too," Penelope murmured against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. Their first months of marriage were an adjustment, learning to share space and make decisions together. Penelope continued managing the household and the ranch accounts, but now she did so as Owen's partner rather than his employee. They fell into comfortable rhythms, working side by side during the day and spending their evenings by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Winter deepened, bringing snow and ice that made ranch work more challenging. Owen came in each evening exhausted, and Penelope made sure hot meals and a warm fire were waiting. But she also made sure he took time to rest, to not work himself into the ground. Owen, in turn, ensured that Penelope never felt trapped or confined. He encouraged her to ride into town when she wanted company, to pursue her own interests, to maintain her independence even within their marriage. In February, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a couple of weeks but had waited to be certain before telling Owen. When she finally shared the news over breakfast one morning, his face transformed with joy. "Truly?" he asked, reaching across the table to take her hands. "Truly," Penelope confirmed, smiling at his reaction. "The baby should come sometime in early September." Owen came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as though she were made of glass. "We are going to have a child," he said wonderingly. "A family. Are you happy?" Penelope asked, though his reaction had made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Owen said. "Penelope, you have given me everything I did not know I wanted. A wife I love, a child on the way. I feel like the wealthiest man in Texas." As winter turned to spring, Penelope's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Owen became even more protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work too hard. Penelope tolerated his hovering with amused patience, knowing it came from love rather than a desire to control. One warm April afternoon, Penelope was hanging laundry when a woman's voice called out, "Hello there." She turned to see a young woman approaching on horseback, accompanied by a man who looked remarkably like Owen. The woman dismounted gracefully and extended her hand. "You must be Penelope," she said warmly. "I am Sarah Lancaster, Owen's cousin. This is my brother David. We live about 20 miles west, and we have been dying to meet you ever since we heard Owen finally got married." Penelope shook Sarah's hand, immediately liking the friendly woman. "It is wonderful to meet you both. Owen has mentioned you." "Nothing bad, I hope," David said with a grin that did indeed remind Penelope of her husband. "Only good things," Penelope assured him. Sarah's eyes dropped to Penelope's rounded stomach and her face lit up. "And I see congratulations are in order. Owen must be over the moon." "He is very excited," Penelope said. "We both are." "As well you should be," Sarah said. "Children are a blessing. David and I lost our parents young, and Owen's father was our guardian for a while. Owen practically raised us, even though he was only 16 himself. He will be a wonderful father." Penelope felt warmth spread through her chest at Sarah's words. "He is a good man." "The best," David agreed. "He deserves to be happy after everything he went through with his father." Penelope invited Sarah and David inside for refreshments. and by the time Owen returned from checking the fence lines, the three of them were deep in conversation. Owen's face broke into a genuine smile when he saw his cousins, and he greeted them with obvious affection. "Why did you not tell me they were coming?" he asked Penelope. "Because I did not know," Penelope replied. "They surprised me too." "We wanted to meet your bride properly," Sarah said, "and to invite you both to dinner next Saturday. David's wife Alice is eager to meet Penelope as well." "We will be there," Owen promised. After Sarah and David left, Penelope turned to Owen. "You never told me you essentially raised your cousins." Owen shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "Their parents died in a fire. My father was their closest relative, so they came to live with us. But he was too drunk most of the time to take care of anyone, so it fell to me and Matthew to look after them." "How old were you?" 16 when they arrived. Sarah was 10 and David was 8. They stayed until Sarah was 18 and married a neighboring rancher. David followed her there and eventually married Alice. Penelope moved closer and took Owen's hand. "You are a good man, Owen Lancaster, an even better man than I realized." "I just did what needed to be done," Owen said. "Same as anyone would have." "No," Penelope said firmly. "Not everyone would have. You took responsibility for 2 children when you were barely more than a child yourself. You sacrificed your own youth to care for them. That is extraordinary." Owen looked at her with such tenderness that Penelope's breath caught. "You see the best in people," he said softly. "Even in me, especially in me. I do not know what I did to deserve you." "You were yourself," Penelope said simply. "Kind and patient and good, that is all you needed to be." Saturday arrived, and Owen and Penelope made the journey to David and Alice's ranch. It was smaller than the Double L but beautifully maintained, with a pretty house surrounded by flower gardens. Alice proved to be a delightful hostess, warm and welcoming, and she and Penelope bonded immediately over their shared experience of being newcomers to the area. As the women talked in the kitchen while preparing dinner, Sarah leaned in conspiratorially. "I have to tell you, when I heard Owen had gotten married, I could not believe it. He always said he would never marry, that he had seen too much unhappiness in marriage to want to try it himself." "What changed his mind?" Alice asked, looking at Penelope with interest. "I do not know," Penelope admitted. "We never discussed it directly." "You changed his mind," Sarah said confidently. "I can see it in the way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars. Owen has spent his whole life taking care of other people. You are the first person I have ever seen who takes care of him in return." Penelope felt tears prick at her eyes, the pregnancy making her more emotional than usual. "He deserves to be cared for," she said. "He has been through so much." "He has," Sarah agreed. "But I think he has finally found his happiness with you." Dinner was a lively affair, full of laughter and good-natured teasing. Penelope watched Owen with his family and saw a different side of him, more relaxed and open than he was with most people. When it came time to leave, Sarah hugged Penelope tightly. "You are family now," she said, "which means you are stuck with us. We will be over all the time, pestering you and the baby." "I would love that," Penelope said honestly. She had been alone for so long that the idea of having family again, people who cared about her, was almost overwhelming. As summer approached, the heat became oppressive. Penelope's pregnancy made the temperatures even harder to bear, and she spent much of her time in the shade, working on sewing baby clothes and preparing the nursery. Owen had cleared out a small room next to their bedroom and spent his evenings building a cradle, his large hands surprisingly deft with the delicate work. One evening in July, as they sat on the porch seeking relief from the heat, Penelope said, "Tell me about your mother." Owen was quiet for a long moment. "Why do you want to know about her?" Because she was important to you, Penelope said. And because our child will carry her blood, I would like to know what kind of woman she was. Owen sighed, his eyes distant. She was gentle and kind, with a laugh that could light up a room. She loved music and flowers and books. She married my father when she was 18, and I think she regretted it every day after. Why did she stay? Penelope asked softly. Where would she have gone? Owen replied. She had no money of her own, no family willing to take her in, and she had Matthew and me to think about. She endured my father's rages and his drinking because she thought we needed her. He paused, his jaw tight. She died when I was 15. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think she just gave up, decided she had suffered enough. Penelope took his hand, squeezing gently. I am so sorry. I swore after she died that I would never be like my father, Owen said. Never raise a hand in anger, never drink myself into oblivion, never make someone I loved feel trapped and hopeless. That is why I hesitated about marriage for so long. I was afraid I might have inherited his temperament along with his name. You are nothing like him, Penelope said fiercely. Nothing. Your mother would be so proud of the man you became. I hope so, Owen said quietly. I tried to honor her memory by being different, by building something good here. When you came along, I realized I finally had the chance to create the kind of family I had always wanted. One built on love and respect instead of fear and obligation. That is what we will have, Penelope promised. Our child will grow up knowing they are loved, that they are safe. We will give them everything we did not have. Owen pulled her close, and they sat together in the gathering darkness. Two people who had survived their own difficult pasts and found healing in each other. August arrived with continued heat and the growing anticipation of their child's arrival. Penelope was large and uncomfortable now, and Owen worried constantly about her health. He had arranged for the town doctor, an experienced man named Dr. Wilson, to be on call when the time came. On a hot afternoon in early September, Penelope felt the first contractions. She was in the kitchen making preserves when the pain hit, sharp and unmistakable. She gripped the counter, breathing through it, and when it passed, she called for Owen. He came running from the barn, taking one look at her face and understanding immediately. The baby. Yes, Penelope said. It is time. Owen's face paled slightly, but he sprang into action. He sent Tommy racing into town to fetch Dr. Wilson while he helped Penelope upstairs to their bedroom. Sarah arrived within an hour, having been staying nearby in anticipation of the birth, and she took over with calm efficiency. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the afternoon and into the night. Owen stayed by Penelope's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring words of encouragement even as his own fear threatened to choke him. Doctor. Wilson monitored the situation carefully, his experienced hands and calm demeanor providing reassurance. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, Penelope gave one last exhausted push, and a baby's cry filled the room. Dr. Wilson held up a small, red-faced infant, beaming. "Congratulations," he said. "You have a son." Owen looked at the tiny baby in wonder, then at Penelope, who was crying with relief and joy. "A son," he repeated. "We have a son." Dr. Wilson cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him in Penelope's arms. She looked down at the little face, the dark eyes blinking up at her, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost frightening. "He is perfect," she whispered. "He is," Owen agreed, sitting on the edge of the bed and putting his arm around his wife. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names, but now, looking at their son, Penelope knew exactly what felt right. "James," she said. "After your mother. You told me once that her maiden name was James." Owen's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that? Our son should carry her name," Penelope said. "To honor the woman who raised you to be the man you are." "James Lancaster," Owen said, testing the name. "It sounds perfect." After Dr. Wilson confirmed that both mother and baby were healthy, and Sarah had helped Penelope get cleaned up and settled, Owen held his son for the first time. The baby was so small in his large, work-roughened hands, and Owen looked terrified he might break the fragile new life. "You will not hurt him," Penelope said softly, watching her husband with their child. "You are gentle." "He is so tiny," Owen marveled. "I had forgotten babies could be this small." "He will grow," Penelope said. "Before we know it, he will be running around the ranch, getting into everything." Owen smiled, imagining it. "I am going to teach him to ride, to rope, to care for the land. And you will teach him to read and do sums and all the things you are so good at." "We will teach him together," Penelope corrected. "How to be strong and kind and good, just like his father." Over the following weeks, they settled into the rhythms of new parenthood. James proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping and eating on a predictable schedule. Penelope recovered well from the birth, though she was exhausted much of the time. Owen took on even more of the household tasks, insisting that she focus on caring for their son and herself. The ranch hands were delighted with the new addition. Diego carved a set of small wooden horses for James, even though the baby was far too young to play with them yet. Samuel built a larger cradle that could be moved from room to room, so Penelope could keep James near while she worked. And Tommy was constantly asking to hold the baby, his young face soft with wonder at the tiny life. Sarah and Alice visited often, bringing meals and advice and eager hands to help with whatever was needed. David stopped by regularly to check on Owen, making sure his cousin was not completely overwhelmed by the demands of fatherhood and ranching. One afternoon in October, nearly a year after Penelope had first arrived in San Pedro, she stood on the porch holding James and watching Owen work with a new horse in the corral. The autumn air was crisp and pleasant, a relief after the oppressive summer heat. James cooed contentedly in her arms, his small hand wrapped around her finger. Owen caught her watching and waved, his face breaking into that smile she loved so much. She waved back, feeling a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. A year ago, she had stepped off that stagecoach broken and afraid, certain that she would never feel safe again. Now she had a husband who loved her, a son who depended on her, and a home that welcomed her. The Double L Ranch had become her sanctuary, the place where she had healed and learned to love again. That evening, after James was asleep in his cradle and they had finished dinner, Owen pulled Penelope into his arms. "Happy anniversary," he said. "Anniversary of what?" Penelope asked, confused. "1 year ago today, you arrived in San Pedro," Owen said. "I remember because it was a Tuesday, and I had just bought feed from the store. I turned around, and there you were, looking lost and scared and so beautiful I could barely breathe." "I did not know you noticed me that quickly," Penelope said. "I noticed everything about you," Owen replied. "The way you tried to hide that bruise, the way you held yourself so carefully like you were afraid of breaking, the way your eyes darted around looking for escape routes. I knew within 5 minutes of meeting you that my life was about to change completely." "Mine certainly did," Penelope said, resting her head against his chest. "That day, I thought I was heading toward one future, and instead, I found something completely different, something infinitely better." "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked quietly. "Staying here, marrying me instead of going back east?" "Never," Penelope said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You saved me, Owen, not just from Charles, but from a life of fear and loneliness. You showed me what real love looks like." Owen kissed the top of her head. "You saved me too," he said. "I was so focused on the ranch, on just surviving day to day, that I forgot what it was like to truly live. You reminded me. You and James both." They stood together in the quiet house, holding each other, grateful for the unexpected paths that had led them to this moment. The years that followed were full and busy. James grew from an infant into a curious toddler who kept Penelope constantly on her toes. Owen expanded the ranch, buying additional land and increasing their herd. Penelope continued managing the accounts and had started teaching a few children from neighboring ranches their letters and numbers, word having spread about her capabilities as an educator. When James was 2.5, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was anticipated and eagerly welcomed. Owen had been hoping for another child, wanting James to have siblings the way he and Matthew had each other. Their daughter was born in early spring, a beautiful baby with Penelope's green eyes and Owen's dark hair. They named her Rose, after the wildflowers that grew across the prairie. James was initially uncertain about the new addition who took so much of his mother's attention, but he quickly adjusted and became a protective older brother. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The ranch prospered under Owen's careful management and Penelope's financial acumen. They added onto the house, building an extra bedroom and a proper study where Penelope could do the bookkeeping and Owen could handle ranch business. Sarah and David's families remained close, their children growing up together despite the distance between ranches. When James was 6 and Rose was 3, Penelope started a small school in the town of San Pedro, teaching children whose families could not afford to send them to the larger schools in the cities. Owen supported the endeavor wholeheartedly, proud of his wife's dedication to education. He often brought James and Rose into town on teaching days, using the time to conduct ranch business and visit with neighbors. One evening, after tucking the children into bed, Penelope and Owen sat together on the porch as had become their custom. The stars were bright overhead, and the night air carried the scent of mesquite and wildflowers. "You ever think about Charles?" Owen asked suddenly. Penelope was surprised by the question. She rarely thought about her former tormentor anymore. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Usually when I am working with a student who comes from a difficult home situation. I remember how powerless I felt, how trapped, and then I am grateful all over again for the courage I found to leave." "I am grateful you left too," Owen said. "I cannot imagine my life without you. Some days I still wake up amazed that you are here, that this is real." "I know what you mean," Penelope said. "Sometimes I look at our life, at our children, at this home we have built, and it feels almost too good to be true. Like I might wake up and discover it was all a dream." "It is not a dream," Owen assured her, taking her hand. "This is real. We are real. And we built this together day by day, choice by choice." "We did," Penelope agreed, "and I would not change a single moment of it." As the years continued to pass, James grew into a responsible young man who loved working alongside his father on the ranch. Rose developed her mother's quick mind and love of learning, spending hours reading and studying. Penelope and Owen eventually had 2 more children, another son they named Matthew after Owen's brother, and a daughter they called Caroline. The house was always full of noise and laughter, the kind of home both Penelope and Owen had dreamed of as children but never had. The Double L Ranch became known throughout the region as a model of success, not just in terms of cattle and profit, but in terms of the family who ran it. Owen Lancaster was respected as a fair employer and a savvy rancher. Penelope Lancaster was admired as an educator and a wise businesswoman. But more than that, They were known as devoted partners who had built something lasting and good. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Penelope with a trip to San Antonio. They left the children with Sarah and David and spent a week away, just the two of them. It was the first extended time they had spent alone together since their honeymoon, and they savored every moment. On their last evening in San Antonio, as they walked along the river, Owen stopped and turned to Penelope. "Do you remember what you said to me the day we met?" Penelope thought back. "I said I had nowhere else to go." "You said that," Owen agreed. "But later you said something else. You said being near me made you feel safe in a way you had not felt since your parents were alive. That was the moment I knew I was in love with you." "I meant it," Penelope said. "You made me feel safe when I had forgotten what safety even felt like. And you made me feel alive again," Owen said. "After Matthew died, I was going through the motions of living but not really living. You changed that. You gave me a reason to be more than just a rancher barely getting by. You gave me a family, a purpose, a future worth building." Penelope felt tears slide down her cheeks. 20 years, she marveled. "It has gone so fast." "And I want 20 more," Owen said. 40 more, however many I can have with you by my side." "You will have them," Penelope promised. "Every day I choose you, Owen Lancaster, just as I chose you that first day when you offered me sanctuary." He kissed her then, gentle and deep, a kiss that held 2 decades of love and partnership and shared dreams. When they finally parted, both were smiling. They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever the future held. James, now 18 and fully invested in the ranch's operation, had managed everything smoothly in their absence. Rose, at 15, had kept the younger children occupied and the household running. Owen and Penelope looked at their oldest children with pride, seeing the capable adults they were becoming. More years passed in the gentle rhythm of ranch life. James eventually married a teacher from San Pedro, a sensible young woman named Elizabeth, and built a house on the western edge of the Double L property. Rose attended a women's college in Austin, coming home during breaks full of new ideas and energy. She eventually became a teacher like her mother, taking over Penelope's school when Penelope decided to focus more time on her grandchildren. Matthew, the second son, proved to have a gift for training horses and built a successful business breeding and selling quality stock. Caroline, the youngest, surprised everyone by marrying a young lawyer and moving to Houston, though she visited the ranch as often as possible. Through it all, Owen and Penelope remained the steady center of their growing family. They weathered droughts and market downturns, celebrated births and mourned deaths, supported their children through heartbreaks and triumphs. The love between them never wavered, only deepened with time and shared experience. When Owen turned 55, he began talking about stepping back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, letting James take on more responsibility. Penelope encouraged this, wanting him to slow down and enjoy the fruits of his decades of hard work. They began spending more time simply being together, taking rides across the property, sitting on the porch in the evenings, traveling to visit their scattered children and grandchildren. One spring evening, when they were both in their early 60s, Penelope and Owen sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. They were holding hands as they always did during these quiet moments, and Penelope felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over her. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, noticing her expression. "That day I arrived in San Pedro," Penelope said. "I was so frightened and alone. I could not have imagined then that my life would turn out like this." "What do you mean?" Owen asked, though he was smiling. "I mean all of it," Penelope said, gesturing broadly. This ranch, our children and grandchildren, 40 years of marriage to the most wonderful man I have ever known. When I stepped off that stagecoach, I thought I was going to a safe place, but not necessarily a happy one. I never dreamed I would find true love and build such an incredible life. I never dreamed I would find you, Owen said. That day when I saw you with that bruise on your face, looking so lost, something in me just knew. I knew you were important, that our lives were about to become intertwined in ways I could not yet understand, and I was right. Your gentle touch made me believe again, Penelope said softly. In kindness, in safety, in love, you took someone who was broken and helped her become whole. We healed each other, Owen corrected. I was broken too, just in different ways. We found each other at exactly the right moment, and we built something beautiful together. Penelope leaned her head on Owen's shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Around them, the ranch settled into evening rhythms. In the distance, they could hear James calling to one of the hands, the sound of cattle lowing softly, the whisper of wind through the mesquite trees. I love you, Penelope said. I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Owen replied. Thank you for getting on that stagecoach. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me every single day. It was the easiest choice I ever made, Penelope said. They remained on the porch until the stars emerged. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would endure through all the years of their lives. The Double L Ranch had been Owen's legacy, but the real legacy they created together was their family, the love they shared, and the proof that even the most painful pasts could be overcome with patience, gentleness, and devotion. As the moon rose over the Texas prairie, casting silver light across the land they had nurtured for decades, Penelope and Owen Lancaster sat together, hand in hand, grateful for every moment that had led them to this place, to each other, to a future neither had dared to dream of until the day a mail-order bride with a black eye met a cowboy with a gentle touch, and both of their lives changed forever. The ranch would continue for generations, passed down through their children and their children's children. But it was the love story of Owen and Penelope that would be told and retold around dinner tables and campfires, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us directly to the best ones, and that genuine love has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Their story became a legend in San Pedro, the tale of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who saved each other, who built a life of joy and purpose from the ashes of their painful pasts, who proved that love, real love, could conquer anything.